Hello everyone, thank you for registering and thank you for coming to the webinar to meet Justin and see us again, and for some of you to meet us for the first time as well. Quite looking forward to going through it all today, and I think you'll love meeting Justin. He's an incredible developer and a very, very nice chap. So we're going to go to the next slide. If I'm not quite looking at the camera, it's got two screens and my controls are on the other screen. So today we're going to go over what we're about, what the project is about, financials, the opportunity, really important stuff like the team, who they are, the experience, past deals, this deal, all relevant stuff and interesting stuff. Please do put your questions in the chat or in the question and answers. I'll see them on either. I'll read them out to Justin at the right time, or I might save them to the end, depends on the question. But feel free to do that. We'll be just jumping in and out, talking about different bits and pieces. We'll talk about the project as it is right now, and then we'll also talk about risks, of course, which is important, and mitigation, which is also important. Then we'll have a focused Q&A session. We are also going to look at the Learn Whilst Investing section, just to understand what the opportunity there is as well. So I'm going to go forward and hand over to Atiksha.
Hi everyone, it's Atiksha from Simple Crowdfunding. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the co-founders and the MD of Simple. Simple Crowdfunding was founded in 2013 and we were first authorised that year for peer-to-peer lending, or lending as it was then. We started with peer-to-peer lending and we added equity, which what this project is about. We added the equity business in 2016. We have been around in the crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending space for a while. And whilst it's sort of 8 years, it feels considerably longer for this type of finance because it was fairly new back in 2013 when we started. We have a floating office in London. We're moored at Temple Station, and Simple Crowdfunding has been recognised in the peer-to-peer finance news magazine, their Power 50 in 2019, and in 2020 and 21, making the top 10. And the Power 50 basically recognises the people and companies to watch in the peer-to-peer lending space in the UK. So it's something that we're very proud of. So that's just a little bit about Simple. We're here to hear from Justin and Belfield. So if we can move to the next slide, please. And Justin, I'm going to leave this to you to introduce.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Tuksha. Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Deno. I run Belfield Developments. So as it says on the slide, we started in 2015. I'd been involved in contracting before then, but that's when we set up the development business. And I think we set it up really because we had done contracting work for other people and seen what they were doing, and just saw there are a number of things we could do better. And so that's partly why we thought let's get involved and do developments ourselves. I mean, some minor thing, like with new build houses, we were amazed that sometimes people would buy a house without necessarily having carpets included or without having turf in the garden. So we felt that somebody, when they buy a new home, if they're moving from one house to another, should be able to move in with everything there. And we liked the idea that it wasn't then full of extras, so you didn't have a base level price for a house, and then actually by the time you put your carpets and turf in, you ended up paying a lot more. So we tried to have it where everything was included and somebody could just move in and live straight away. So we do, as it says here, we do consider all the sort of small details. So we'll think about when you enter a room, which side the light switch needs to be, what are the order of the switches that make more sense. We'll think about how people are using the spaces, where their vacuum is going to go, where the ironing board goes, so where the bin goes in the kitchen. Some things that hadn't been considered by or we felt weren't always considered by the developers. So that's one of the reasons, some of the reasons that we thought we could do it better. And again, as it says here, family owned. So I set it up 2015 initially with my brother. He was involved in the contracting business, and now I work with my sister Camilla, who does the design, and we'll talk a bit more about our backgrounds in a little bit later.
And actually, that's a really good thing. So if we can move to the next. So the core team, Justin, are you and Camilla. So can you just tell me a little bit about your backgrounds and what you do within the business today?
Certainly. Yep. So I because we're a small team, then I suppose I end up picking up anything that would otherwise fall between the people that we do have here. So I do a bit of everything, but primarily it's finding sites, dealing with the finance side, raising the finance, dealing with the professional team early on. So from when we identify a site, looking at the opportunities on that site, working with the architects to see what we can fit on the site, working the numbers, talking to the estate agents, and sort of pulling it all together. I still have quite a presence on site during the project. So although we have a great team that help with the build, I will be very often at site, just sort of checking how things are going. But then when it gets to the marketing stage, that's when Camilla really steps in. So I'll come back to her design element afterwards, but when we get, she'll put together all the marketing material and work with the estate agents to get that ready for early off-plan sales. And then she has historically worked with the buyers during that process. So if we're selling off plan, she'll work with them to get their choices, with choosing kitchen cabinet colours and carpets, etc. She'll work with them. But earlier on in the process, once we've decided we're going to go for a site, she will also get involved in the detail of the layout and crucially the specification. Right. So her background is she studied design and so has a very good eye for putting things together, and she'll create these beautiful mood boards with the thinking about the type of house, the type of buyer, or the location, the colours, and bring it all together, and then I have to tell her what the budget is for all these things, and we have to find a compromise. I think that's where we work very well together. Is she will start off with a really aspirational view of how this development should look, and then I sort of bring the reality of budget and constraints and some of the technical constraints, and then we find a nice compromise. I think if it was just left to me, then things would probably be too cost driven. So it works very well to have that balance.
That's really good. And you mentioned that Belfield has been established since 2015.
Yeah. But
you've actually been in property in some shape or form for considerably longer, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I've always had a love for property, and as children, our family would always be doing up houses and moving on. So I think I was surrounded by that from birth, really. But got into property initially with an investment firm. So we were looking at, this was commercial property, but we were looking at big industrial units and industrial estates. So that was great to get used to dealing with. Very big numbers, much bigger numbers than we're dealing with now. But the principle of the investment side of things and how property stacked up from an investment perspective. Then moved from there into construction. So as I mentioned earlier, my brother used to run a construction business, and so I got involved in that and helped to grow that, mostly from a finance perspective. I was involved in the business, but again, it's a small business, so got very involved in lots of elements. And that was really important to help understand from a contracting perspective, on site, how do things work, what are the pitfalls, what's happening, and it's a really difficult job, contracting, and I think that makes us a much more understanding developer, I think, by having been that side of the fence. And so there are plenty of opportunities where we could have been contractual in the past with the contractors we've worked with, but having that understanding of the whole process means you try and find that collaborative and way through the problems. So I think that's really been really beneficial.
Thank you. And so there may be more questions about you and Camilla later, so we can come back to those if people want to find out specifics. Maybe what we should do is now move on to the project itself and talk about the project. And so thank you, and the one after, please. So moving on to the project itself, all of this information I know is available through platform, but can you just summarize what this project opportunity is about? So carry on.
Certainly. So yes, as it says on there, it's 13. So it's a site. It's a greenfield site, but it's in the centre of a lovely village, which I'll touch on the next slide. But it's very central within this village of Sandford. But it is it's a field at the moment that's surrounded by houses. So it was already allocated in the local plan for development, and we've come and taken the planning from scratch right through to get to these the 13 houses. So 13 altogether. We've got 10 open market houses, and then 3 of them will be affordable houses. Our view is we try to make sure that those, and it's encouraged by local authority to make those tenure blind, so people shouldn't be able to see from the outside that there's any difference between them. We don't sort of tuck them in a corner and hide them away. You'll drive straight past them, and they'll, one of them is going to be built with stone, so they'll look in keeping with the rest of the development. So we're looking for up to £510,000 as the equity portion of this investment, which at £500 a share obviously gives us 1,020 shares altogether. If we get less, so we'll need a minimum of 300, but if we get less, then we can top up that difference. But 510 is certainly the figure that we're aiming for. And that then gives a return of 40% over the project to the investors before tax.
It's a projected return, isn't it? So, and we're going to talk about any potential movement as part of the risk mitigation piece anyway, so we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And the 24 months is, again, based upon your timelines, is a projection at the moment, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So I think we touched on it later, but it is based on a 3-month lead-in from when we buy the site to when we start on site. We've allowed 15 months for the build, and then we allow a 6-month sales period. So that's what makes up that 24 months. So it's only 15 of that is the build as it's planned.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in with a question because it was about exactly that, and I think you've really answered it. It was about the timelines, and there's how much of that would you consider as contingency? Do you think you might bring it in earlier, or?
I think we're hoping to start on site within 2 months. So I suppose we might shave a month off there at the beginning, and at the moment we would expect to sell much during the build, and therefore we would expect that 6 months to be quite generous at the moment based on the current market conditions. We've done no marketing. I don't know how frequently our website is. We don't promote the website per se, but people seem to have found us from all sorts of different places. So we keep a list of people who are interested in the development and keep a note of their details. So we're building that database of people already, and that will then work with the estate agents as once we start getting on site to generate more interest. So again, I'd expect that 6 months based on current conditions to improve.
Thank you.
Sorry, just one question, just because it's relevant into that part.
Yeah.
So do you tend to have pre-sales?
Yes, so we will aim to get all the legal packs ready as soon as we can, and then start marketing probably at the end of the groundworks phase. In the beginning, when we're starting to see buildings go up, is when so really 6 months before completion of the first early units, is the earliest. Sorry, the late. We don't want exchanges to be too much before 6 months before the end of the project. So we'll start marketing to generate some interest with a view that we exchange contracts no more than 6 months.
Okay, we have got a question from Tina about planning, but I'll leave that to when we're at the right slide for that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Tina.
Moving on to the next slide, please.
Sorry.
So this is the site in terms of what it actually looks like at the moment. So you mentioned it's in Samford, which I understand is 10 miles from outside of Exeter. Can you tell us a bit about the location, why you picked this type of location, and what you're proposing to build? So we've got a site plan on the next slide.
Yeah.
Why it's all relevant. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So the location, as I say, it's very central in this village. So the village of Sandford is just a couple of miles from a town called Crowdfunding, a mid-Devon town. So it's got all the essentials there. But as you say, Tuxer, it's very close to Exeter as well. So it's a very easy commute from here into Exeter if needed. But it is a lovely village. It's got a cracking and well-renowned pub in the Lamb in Samford is very well regarded. And also the value, it's a bit of a microclimate for values in Samford. So you do see stronger values in Samford than you might in other villages of a similar distance from Crowdfunding and Exeter. And in particular, this site is, as I say, because it's quite central in the village, but it's close to, so you can't quite see it, I think, on that on the plan. There's a lovely Park House, which is a lovely listed building. Oh, so you just about see it on that plan below. It's a lovely listed building, so it's close to the older part of the central part of the village as well. So very accessible. It's very good connectivity to the footpaths. So yeah, and the view. It's a shame actually this image doesn't show it off. But if you were to lift the camera up, the views that's facing south, and the views across the valley are really lovely. So it's far-reaching right across the valley.
And a question's come in that's relevant, so I'll ask it now. Have you got experience developing in this area already? We
haven't done anything in this village, but all of our work is within an hour of Exeter. So depending on whether the question means this particular village or not, but so yes is to within an hour of Exeter, but not in this village.
Thank you. Can you move to the site? And this is what the plan looks like.
Yeah, that's right.
So 13 houses.
Yeah.
Why 13 houses? Why that design? What process did you go through to get to this position?
Well, it's been a really fun one to do, because we've had this site on an option agreement with the landowners, and the landowners were previously lived at Park House. So although it's four sisters in their 70s, they grew up at Park House, and so their connections with the village and this site are long-standing. But part of, I think, the appeal of them working with us was that I was happy to include them in our discussions, in our plans, and so we sort of worked with them, although it was our design and we pretty much drove the direction of it. We did try and consider anything that they were keen to see. So bungalows we've got two bungalows in there, which are the ones that's both far left and far right of the scheme. Was something they were keen to see, as were we. But we also looked at a much higher density scheme. So we looked at a 20-unit scheme, but we decided it wasn't the right product. So it would have been much more sort of 2- and 3-bed houses, and we felt that wasn't quite right for this area. We wanted sort of bigger, so these are 3- and 4-bed houses. We also looked at a 15-unit scheme, but in part it didn't have as good a feel as this smaller scheme. But also, as you can see on the right-hand side, there's a little section. It says POS, which stands for Public Open Space, but under there is a water attenuation tank, which serves another development. So actually, that whilst we could have dug it up and moved it, we made a decision we'd leave it there and have a smaller scheme, more open space. We felt that was a nicer thing to do. We've also, so you could probably see in ours on the sort of bottom right-hand part, the southeastern part of the site, we've got some above ground drainage. So I mean, if people aren't familiar with it, when you're designing the drainage for a site, there's a hierarchy that you're trying to achieve, and natural soakways is the number one. But if you can't achieve that, then a more natural attenuation pond is preferred to a concrete tank or crates under the ground. So that's what we'll have there. It won't be a pond all year round. It's only when there's a lot of rain that it would fill up. But it will be nice because there's some ecology benefits to having the above ground drainage ponds that down there. And then on the southwestern portion of the site, this is something, again, we worked with the landowners. They were keen to see that section of land gifted to there's a Millennium Green Trust in the village who have land elsewhere, so that will be gifted to the Millennium Green Trust as part of the development scheme. So as I said before, we got 2 bungalows on there, and then there are 4 houses along the southern boundary in between the 2 bungalows. Those are 4 beds, and there are 2 different designs of each. Then there is a cluster of 4 to the north of the access road, which are 3-bed houses. They're actually 2 different designs again there of 3 beds, and then the 3 houses as you enter are the affordable houses to the scheme. So there'll be 3 beds as well.
It's really nice to have that variety.
Yes, yeah, I think that's something for us, Davin, when we're designing. We're always keen to see, and I think it makes it more interesting. But certainly from a sales perspective, if we had 13 of the same thing, we'd probably sell the first few very easily. But we may then find that you're just looking for one type of buyer. But this, there'll be, for some people, bungalows will all be the only thing they're interested in. So, but there are only 2 of them, so there should be good demand for those, and the same with the others. It does make it more expensive at design stage to have more house types, but our view is that means we've only got 3 of one house type. Sorry, they're only of the same house type. There are only 3 of them, so that's the maximum number. So we think that'll be a nice mix when it comes to selling.
Couple of questions. I think so. David asked about experience of developments in the area, and I think you've mentioned within Exeter.
Within about an hour of Exeter is our area that we cover, yeah.
And how many sites similar to this have you done in the past?
So this is we've done 4 projects to date, and so this is a BR6 because we've got another one going on. So we've fully completed 3. We're on site with 1 at the moment. We're starting another one in early January, and then this one will be in March. And the 3 that the first project we did was a new build scheme. I would argue more difficult than this because it was a town centre location with an existing warehouse that we needed to knock down and a tight access and very minimal space for any sort of site compound. Then we've done a couple of refurbishment projects, which we'll touch on a bit later. And then the next 3 projects, including this one, are all new build and actually all greenfield, greenfield or brownfield sites, but with no existing buildings. This one is particularly pleasant because we've got such a big amount of space comparatively for site storage. So where that public open space is on the eastern side, plenty of room for site compound and storage and what have you.
You're being spoiled.
It is. It's a really nice site.
Can we move on to project costs? I know there's quite a number of questions which have come through. Yeah. We will get to them, but I just want to make sure we cover off some of the core components as well. So with regards to project costs, can you talk us through the core information? And I just want to tell everyone that full details are available in the IM. More information is available there. and that will be, and we'll talk about the IM a bit later on, but this is just as a high level view in terms of what we're working with. So over to you, Justin.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll just whiz through them. If there are any questions, do raise them. But so the acquisition cost covers basically it's the land, stamp duty, and the estate agent's fees to buy it. And then so the bulk of our expenditure is going to be in that second one, the construction cost. So that's everything for houses, groundworks, road infrastructure. That's sort of everything on site. And we work with a construction managers, Ease, who have put together the cost plans for this. Then next one down, contingencies. So that is based on a 5% of build costs. That's what we use for that. Because we do sort of such detailed pricing, we hope that the contingency isn't there to be used for things that are missed. It's for things that are unforeseen, genuine unforeseens. Professional fees and utilities, it all seems like a lot, but they do all add up. So that does cover architects' fees and all of the building control, all of the fees payable, legal fees and sales fees, solicitors, agents, etc. So it all mounts up in there. Infrastructure levy, that's an amount that we pay as part of the planning approval to the local authority. The bulk of that actually is hopefully going to be used by the village of Samford for some improvements to the cycle paths that they're doing at the moment. So that gives us our sort of total development cost, and then all the finance costs on top of that. So the bank interest element is the running margin. That's the interest on it as we draw down, and then the fees and legal fees are put it in place, but the bulk of that is the arrangement fee to put the facility in place. And then obviously the simple crowdfunding fees. That gives us our total finance cost. So that gives us total cost of the project, and then the income, and therefore the profit at the bottom.
Fabulous. Does that cover planning, the planning costs? Which kind of leads me to another question, which I was going to wait till later, but since we're talking about the costs,
yeah.
Someone has asked, has it got full planning? And
so, yeah. Yes, it has. So it's the only slight caveat is that it went to planning committee, and the planning committee wanted us to change a couple of the roofs we had proposed some metal standing seam roofs and some slate, and they wanted more slate than we had proposed. So we had to agree with them the number of roofs that would be covered in slate as opposed to metal, which we've now agreed. So we just wait for the actual permission to come through, but the resolution to grant was issued at committee back in September. And then I think you asked about planning fees, didn't you? So yes, the planning fees are included in the professional fees and utilities section is where the planning fees are.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move to the next slide? So this is really just a summary of the investment opportunity. We've talked a little bit about planning, which I know is listed here, and the expected time to completion. So you've left yourself a 6-month sales period. Are you expecting to use that, or because I know you've recently completed a project, haven't you? What's the market doing?
The market right now is very hot. I mean, beyond my expectation of what it should be. So yes, as you said, we've just the site that we're on at the moment, we won't finish it until June next year. It's 23 houses, and we've got probably 10, 12 our timber frames are up and roofs are on, but nothing more. We've just started the first fix on the first 4, so it's still fairly early days. But we released them just over 7 weeks ago, and all 23 are reserved within that time frame. So
that's amazing. That's really
certainly beyond we hoped you might get sort of half reserved during the build, and so it's phenomenal. Yeah, the demand at the moment is very strong for houses down in Devon. Very strong indeed. Well, it's so hard to know how what we'll be bringing these to market a little bit in in a year or so's time, I suppose. But we have already engaged with the agents and said, we've sold all those on another site, so do we start talking about this site and start generating interest? As I said earlier, we're getting people approach us to register interest, and when we've told them about the build time frame or when we would expect to complete, it hasn't been an issue for most people. So whereas previously I might have thought we would need to wait until close to the time to start marketing, we may consider here, in light of the heat in the market at the moment, that we do start marketing earlier than we would otherwise.
It is still a year and a half away, isn't it? So I just want to remind everyone that the market could do a lot within a year and a half. So it may not be as hot as it is right now.
Or it may be hotter.
Or it may be hotter. So we just don't know. But based upon what you're seeing today, there is a huge demand, isn't there?
There is, yes, there is, and especially for houses. So we do have, I should say, another project we've got that we've completed, which is apartments with no outside space, and that is much slower. But this, because they are detached houses and with gardens, we would expect them to fall into the sort of higher demand that we're seeing at the moment.
And the additional communal space.
Yes, it should be a very appealing place. And also I think, Tuxer, it's not, there are a lot of houses being built, but a lot of them are on big estates. And so when you find a scheme which is smaller like this, there are certain people it appeals to that just won't consider something on an estate. And we're using natural stone, we're using metal roofs and natural slate, aluminium windows. The specification of the internals is high, air source heat pumps. So we're trying to give people as many reasons as they can. I think the issue will be whether people can afford to buy them. That'll be. I think that there'll be a lot for people to like about them. But if they're bigger units and they've got high specification, they're going to be more expensive than you could buy another 4-bed in the area for less money.
That's fair enough. Could we move on to the next? So whilst we're talking about the finances of the project, this is roughly what the finance stack looks like. Could you just talk everyone through what this is telling you?
Yeah, certainly. So basically the project is funded by both senior debt or bank funding and the equity. And the reason it's split into 4 here is you've got two chunks of senior debt and 2 chunks of equity. So starting with the senior debt, the bank, the development finance, we've worked with this bank before, but they've got a sort of tie up with Homes England, where the bank lend the 3 million and 30, and Homes England, as part of the same loan, so it's administered by the bank, top up. So it allows them to offer a higher loan to value senior debt product, because Homes England are backing what is it, in effect 10% of the end value of the scheme, and then the bank lends 60%. So we get a total of 70% loan to value, but from those 2 sources. But as I say, it's administered by the bank, and then because that's 70% of value, that gives us an amount based on the projected value of the scheme. And then what's left is what needs to be met as an equity investment, and then we've just split that as an 80-20. So we're looking for 80% of that from the crowd, and we'll provide 20% of that, so 130,000.
And then in terms of repayment out the other side, what's the order there?
So it starts with the senior debts. That'll be first. And that has to be repaid before we can then distribute any of the equity. So we start paying all of the bank funding back from the initial sales. Then the equity gets paid back, the capital element of it gets paid back. And that's pro rata to the amount. So based on the 80-20, then obviously the crowd will get 80% of any proceeds and we will get 20. And then when we distribute the profit, then that's just distributed as per the profit share. So that's then after the capital has been repaid.
Thank you.
But I suppose worth noting, Tuksha, that because of the size of the senior debt, that obviously it's quite a few of the first few houses to sell are swallowed up by the repaying the senior debt. So the equity and and obviously the profit will come out very much towards the end, the final couple of sales, depending on which properties they are, and the equity would be probably the two before that. Yeah,
no, that's understood. Can we just talk a little bit about we briefly spoke about past projects before, and experience, and you've got a couple of projects, haven't you, which you're happy to talk through. I know there's more information in the investment memorandum, so we can come back to that. So Devon, if you could move to the first past project, the next one. Thank you. So this is Prairie House. Can you tell us a bit about this and what happened?
Yeah, so it was a beautiful building, as you can see. There's a marketing image we put together, but it's an existing building, so it's a stunning building. So it's in the centre of a town called Ossory St Mary, which is about 10 minutes outside Exeter, and it's in a lovely part of the village. Again, the old part of the village, overlooking the church. So yeah, stunning location and a stunning building. It was formerly a care home, and it's had a lovely wealth of history beforehand. It's been a police station, a magistrates court, a school. It's got some wonderful history to it, which, because it's grade 2 star listed, then when we went for planning, there were a good number of challenges involved in getting planning for it because of its status, its listed status. However, because it had been used as a care home, and this back in the days when they loved using asbestos for fireproofing, then they'd done a lot of ripped it to pieces inside a number of times over its lifetime, and filled it full of asbestos. So there wasn't a great deal left of character internally to preserve, which in many ways was very useful, because it allowed us to have a more flexibility. We were able to move walls and divide it up in a way. But being an old building and being a conversion, it came with its challenges. And also we were working on this one during the COVID shutdown, so we had that to contend with as well. So it's certainly had its challenges, this project, but it's completed now. There are 6 of the apartments are occupied. People living there, and it's got a nice sort of buzz about it now. And these are built, they're done to a very high standard. They've got wooden floors and NEF appliances, and lots of some nice features in there. The bathrooms are some very high-end bathrooms. So it's fun doing a project where you're able to spend a bit more money on some of the fixtures and fittings. So yeah, it's been a very rewarding project. As I say, very challenging, very rewarding. And we've seen, as the numbers say on the slide, we've improved marginally, but we have improved from the position we set out to hit. So that's been great with all the challenges. So costs did go up, but so did sales by more, and so we've ended up pleased with the project, and it's lovely to go and see it and see people in there and using it.
Thank you. And the next one?
Yeah, so this is in some respects similar. It was also an old care home, but this is in Teignmouth, which is a lovely seaside town for those who don't know. And this overlooks the sea. So if you were to turn around 180 degrees, you've got a cracking view over the sea. So this, if you see in the picture, the two sort of bays at the front are the existing building, and then we added the 2 wings either side. So it was lovely to be able to create what I think now, if someone were to go there, they wouldn't necessarily know that had been added on. So we matched the proportions, we matched the windows, we even took a mould of the original moulding around, you can just see it in between the ground and first floor, and had it remade in the same profile to then match through on the rest of the house.
I absolutely couldn't tell before.
Yeah, great.
I absolutely could not tell.
It was fun seeing the pictures. It was on the market as a care home, so the details weren't they weren't sort of fluffed up at all. So that we've got an image of it from when we bought it, and it's a very tired looking building with nasty PVC windows. And again, this was fun. We've got all the balustrade along the top wall. That's all cast stone balustrade, and it was nice again to do a real high end conversion there. So we made the original building. We got 6 apartments. Then the 2 wings either side were 7 and 8, and then there was a coach house at the back which we got another 2 in. So we were 10 apartments altogether. And this one financially, this was a really fantastic job. So we made a lot more on the sales than we thought. I'd like to think in part to the excellent job we did, but I think the location was really quite something. And just in the foreground, it was a lovely communal gardens which we sort of designed, and it was quite formal looking garden to the front, but it's it was again another very rewarding project.
And all of your projects have so far been on time and exceeded original profit forecast, is that correct?
That's right, yes. I mean, there are, in terms of timings, is obviously when we extend the scope of work, we would expect things to take a bit longer. But yes, they haven't gone unnecessarily beyond over time. So they would only exceed the original project program if we've added things in or changed scope of works. So, but yes, they've as per our plans, they have been finished on time, and we've always got more in terms of profit. I assume that's because I'm conservative and cautious with pricing, but yeah, I think this one in particular, there was an element. It was something very special at the end. And my feeling with Samford is we've got a similar sort of set. I mean, different obviously because it's a different location, but a similar set of compelling reasons why people want to be there. And I'm hopeful that we'll see that sort of demand for the product at Samford really. See it there.
Thank you. So let's just talk about the timescales for Samford. If we can move to the next slide, please. So what I'm keen to understand is you already have planning,
yes,
but you're waiting on the final confirmation paperwork.
Yeah.
And then can you just briefly talk us through at a high level what that plan currently looks like?
Yeah, so what you're seeing on the slide there is the construction element of the program. So for what we expect to start in March, and that's a deliberate. Really, we could probably start a bit earlier, but we've deliberately done that just to get out of the worst bit of the winter, and hopefully give ourselves a good chance of getting the groundworks done early, and then be building during hopefully the drier months. I mean, you can never quite predict the weather, but that's the plan. So we've got in there an initial 3-month phase of groundworks, and then we'll move into the superstructure, the above ground element thereafter. So it tends to be nothing. It's all the sort of grotty, dirty work that happens in the first few months, and then we'll start seeing some houses come out of the ground in the middle of next year. But in the meantime, we're just sort of doing all that, and there is an awful lot of preparation work that goes into getting on site. So we've obviously mentioned the planning, but I mean utilities is obviously a very crucial one to work on. So we know where the connections are for foul water, surface water. We've done capacity checks for gas. Well, actually, gas doesn't exist in the village, but we've checked it, and so electricity, telecoms. We know we can get a full fibre to the premises telecoms solution here. We know where the electricity is coming from. We're engaging with the contractors, so we're getting ahead on that front. And also with the roads and drainage, where we have adoptable roads and adoptable drains, whilst constructing them is a little bit more onerous than constructing private roads, particularly. The most onerous part is dealing with the paperwork, and so again, that's something we try and get ahead of ourselves. So we've had the road and drainage drawings done. and I think they'll be submitted in the next sort of month or so to the authorities, so that we can get that bit ahead again before we start on site. So yeah, there's a lot of planning preparation, and obviously funding and things are happening in advance of what you see on the slide there.
And this is a very, very basic view of it, isn't it? Because I know you've got spreadsheets galore in terms of Gantt charts and everything else, haven't you, behind it?
Yes, yeah, I mean, it's yeah, the current, I mean, it's the program on the site we're on at the moment is pages and pages of different coloured bars, and it develops as the project goes. You know, it's never the same. It will change sort of month on month, but more to do with the order within that. So we're actually at the project we're on at the moment, we were due to finish at the end of June. That they're targeting the end of May, and at the moment they're still on to reach the end of May. So it's possible we're ahead on that one, but they still within that they're changing things around. As I mean, there are always things that crop up. It's you know, daily there'll be issues that arise on site that you've got to deal with, and you know, sometimes they're good, and a lot of the time they're not so good. And the program is very much it's built with an element of flexibility in there. So when it's built from day one, it is a sort of it has a lot of comfort. It's very much sequential. If it went to plan, everything would be very calm, but inevitably something happens and it pushes one part on, and then people have to, you know, catch up and work around that. But that's the nature of the industry, I think.
That's the nature of development, and a lot of the value in a developer who has been through stuff like that before, knows it's coming, and deals with it. And in that light, I've got a question from David, and I'm going to read this out just to make sure it's exactly his question. You mentioned you're working on some projects at the moment. Can you advise estimated completion dates? So you've started to go into that already, which is great, and it turns out they're ahead. I want to understand how thinly you're spreading yourself.
Yeah, so good question. So the one, as I say, the one we're doing in Kids Girls at the moment, yeah, that's due to finish in June. And then we've got one project which will start in January, as I said, and that will finish most likely the end of 2022, possibly early 2023. This one starts in March and then finishes middle of 2023. That's where we're aiming for at the moment. In terms of spreading, it's the people we work with on site. So once we get on site, that in some respects, that's when my involvement, the amount of time I spend actually reduces. So at the moment, I'm doing fortnightly visits to the site we're on at the moment, or minimum fortnightly for site meetings and what have you. But the guys on site, they're a fantastic team on site. There's a full-time project manager and a full-time quantity surveyor. So they're a more expensive way of managing a site than sort of some contractors we've spoken to before might just put a site manager on there and maybe half the project manager in an office. But this is, yeah, so two full-time people, and they have a decent office on site as well. It's not just a scrappy cabin. They have decent, nice big office, heated, and with all the telecoms and what they need there. And you know, our experience of working with them is they're very, very solution based. So they'll come to me and say, Justin, this is the problem. This is what we've spoken to this person. Here are the two solutions, or the number of solutions. This is what we think. Yes or no. Yes or no. And so it makes it much easier for me to do my bit because they're good at doing that. So yeah, it's important for us as well, David, to stagger the start dates for things. So as I say, because my involvement is very heavy up front and getting it on site, that's why we want to make sure we have started this other project in January before, and again, why we wouldn't want to start Samford any earlier, even though we could, because we don't want to start two at the same time. Samford particularly, because we've had an option agreement on it, we've had plenty of time to, you know, with the comfort of knowing that we've got control of the site, but we haven't had the cost of the equity, if you like, you know, as a reason to rush. Then we've had plenty of time to plan it and prepare it. And so for us to be in a position where we would expect to have all of the drawings and everything ready by the end of January, which is what we're currently working to, means that we're at least a month and a bit ahead of when we expect to be ready for this site. So yeah, I think that the planning and time that we've had to lead into this project has been more than we've ever had. So yeah, does that answer the question, David?
Perfect. Thank you for clearing that up.
Excellent.
So yes, with regards to, I want to move on to risk mitigation, because I am also very aware we're running low on time.
Okay.
Before we move on to risk mitigation, I just want to ask a question which has come up about green homes.
Yep.
So are any of your sites and developments green per se, or what have you put consideration into the developments that you do, knowing it's potentially going that way?
I'm very pleased the question's been asked. I could do another webinar on how excited I am about green building. The quick answer is we've been looking at different ways of modern methods of construction, different ways of building for about 3 years probably, trying to find a solution that works from a cost perspective. So I've been on a journey over those years in terms of my understanding of how or where we should be going. And we're actually working not on this project, but on the project before. We're working with an architect who are 30 years experience in passive house, so that we can understand, we can take a lot of their learning and a lot of their knowledge about how you design energy efficient buildings. So my view at the moment is we very much need to be looking at fabric first. We need to be trying to insulate the buildings very well, make them airtight, orientate them correctly, make sure the form factor is good, so that we're not losing energy unnecessarily. That's as a first and foremost, because obviously the building is there for a very long time. And then look at, we've looked at some very interesting and low-cost heating solutions. So direct electric panel heaters, because they are low cost to install, minimum, if not no maintenance. And if you've got a high-performing building, you're not using a great deal of power anyway. So the fact that it's electric is less of an issue. And because electricity is becoming more and more decarbonised, then it's also a greener solution than it once was. That being said, we think that the market isn't quite ready for that. If someone comes and says it's electric panel heaters, we think there's going to be a negative association with it. So what we're proposing at the moment are high levels of insulation, triple glazing, and good air tightness, but still have an air source heat pump, underfloor heating, and we feel that then strikes a balance between we're using a renewable heat source, but we've got underfloor heating, which I think people most people would recognise is a premium heat source. It's a very nice one as well. And we in these projects we're working towards being much more mindful of sustainable materials and healthy building materials. So we're looking into different paints we might be able to use, minimising use of MDF because of its potential health issues. So, but again, we're having to sort of balance. We can't do everything at once, so we're having to sort of balance those, and maybe we do some of them, not others. So, as I said, I've tried to keep it brief, but we certainly very interested in it, spent a lot of time looking at it, but we're trying to balance what we do with the cost of it, because most of the things that I've just talked about cost more. In fact, all of them cost more, I think. So again, it's balancing, it's finding the right product as well. The scheme we're doing at the moment that I mentioned, where we've sold all 23, they're 2- and 3-bed houses, and probably wouldn't be able to absorb the additional costs that we would have to charge for doing that. But here in Samford and the other one, Littlepen, yeah, they're at the sort of value that we feel if there's an extra £20,000 of cost in doing something greener, that we'll see that come back.
That's fair enough. And maybe one of the things we can do, if you can talk all day about sort of green homes, is maybe that can be one of the learning elements. So whilst maybe not all of it is relevant to Samford, we can extend that out maybe.
I'd be delighted to. It'd be really interesting to get people's thoughts, and I'd be fascinated to talk to. I mean, I talk to as many people as I can about it to understand what people. In fact, we're doing at the moment. We're working with a media company in Exeter to do a focus group. In fact, it's happening now, but I'm not allowed to be involved in it. We're doing a focus group with 10 people who are looking to buy houses in the southwest, and we're asking them questions about exactly this. We've given them a list of sort of things you could do to upgrade a house from both health and environmental, as well as some sort of smart home elements. And we just said, look, this is what we think are the rough costs of putting all these things in. What would you do if this is a shopping list? What would you add to it? And so it's very interesting to find out, because we sit, Camilla and I sit down and say, if we could spec a house that we thought was the right sort of house to build, and we knew someone would buy it for the right money, then it would look quite different to what we're building at the moment. And in part, that's because we don't have enough sort of market evidence to suggest that we could build a house, spend, I mean, the list of things, the shopping list we've given this focus group this evening is £100,000 worth of additional things you could add to a house to improve it. And they vary across, say, a number of different aspects. It doesn't have to all be that, but it'd be fascinating to hear what are people willing to pay more. Our view is probably 20 or 30 grand. 5% is probably doable, but would someone pay 20 or 30% more for a house? I don't feel comfortable at the moment doing that as a spec build. But
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I'm going to come back to the risk and mitigation, if I may. So these are 4 areas that you've identified as potential risks as part of being a developer. And there are ways that you mitigate these. So whilst I appreciate you cannot eliminate all risks, you can mitigate as many of them as possible, as best you can. Yeah. So can you just run through these different areas and what you see sort of fits under each one?
I think, starting with build cost, it was a really major one. I suppose it's probably one that we have a reasonable amount of control over, or we can do stuff about. So starting off with good surveys is critical. So we've already done the in-depth trial pit surveys on the site. So they'll go and do, they'll dig holes throughout the site, they'll test the ground, they'll see, so we know what sort of foundations we're going to put, so we know we can do strip foundations, there's no piling involved. We know there's no contamination, but also we're choosing a greenfield site, and so we have previously developed sites where we've had old petrol tanks we've had to take out the ground and have contaminated material carted off site. So we've experienced what can happen, and in that case we did all of those tests, and there was just this one area, as sort of 4-metre square section, which wasn't tested because we didn't do it absolutely everywhere, and that's where there was a bit of made up ground that had to be dug out and filled back in again. So as you said, Atuksha, you can work hard to mitigate as much, but you're not going to eliminate it. But in terms of the actual build costs, once you're out of the ground, new build is obviously that bit easier, because once you're out of the ground, it's much more defined. You're not going to find any nasties in the rest of the building. But also we just do very detailed market tested cost plans. So when we're putting the cost together, again, because we're working with construction managers, we're through them, we're going to all the individual subcontractors and asking them to price the package. All of those will have pre-let meetings with the construction managers. They'll come in, talk through the plans before we start and identify any issues. I'm off tomorrow on this project. I'm off tomorrow to meet the architects, the electricians and the plumbers to run through the plans for this one. So we've drawn up the mechanical and electrical plans, and talk through it to say, are there any clashes, or are there any issues to do with soil pipes in the wrong place? So just really trying to find out any of the issues at this stage, and talk with the suppliers about them. Moving to sales value decrease, that's one that's sort of less in our control. I mean, I suppose when you look long term at property prices, they've only done one thing over a longer period of time. But there is a chance that, especially because we're seeing price increases, there is a chance that they do turn. But I suppose I've always thought if the sales values do start decreasing, then we've probably got quite a correction in the entire economy, and so it's going to be difficult for everyone. It won't just be limited to, as my view, it won't just be limited to property. But we're building, I suppose, a way of mitigating that is we build a good product in a good location. It will be a product that people will want. It's sort of, in the case of the Samford project, it's a more aspirational type property, and so we would expect to be in sort of higher demand than perhaps a large new build housing estate.
And also, is the different styles of houses as well, isn't it? So the appetite for those could vary.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then extended project duration. This is just a program overrun, really. But again, with good planning, and the construction managers we work with are good at that. As we talked about the depth of the program that they produce for the scheme. And it's about being one of the reasons I really like working with them, and why I'm sort of happy to see the amount of money that we spend on resourcing it, is in they're sitting there in their office looking at programs, they're planning ahead, they're thinking about things. They're not just out on site reacting to problems. They're sitting in the site cabin proactively talking about what's happening. As an example, so we've got whatever it is, 10, 15 timber frames out of the ground with first fix M&E, and one of the emails earlier this week is about the paving slabs for the patios and paths. So we're a long way off them being there, but they're thinking about those things weeks, months in advance, and so yeah, that's how you keep on top of program. And I very much think that program is about project management. Project management is a discipline and a skill. And it's not necessarily the same skill as being a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician. It's about project management, and that's where these guys are very good. And then interest rate rises again, completely out of our control. But it's just sort of worth noting that because we are borrowing money, and it is linked to interest rates, then if that does go up, then our cost of borrowing goes up too with it.
That's understood. So I just want to go back to, there were a couple of other questions. One was, sorry, I've just lost it. Yeah, carry on.
Okay, so a couple of questions from Dina. What's the difference between a greenfield and a brownfield site?
So really, a greenfield is where there is nothing there at all. It literally is a greenfield. Brownfield is a more misleading, I think, phrase, because it refers to where there has been something on the site before. So the example I gave, where there was a warehouse that we knocked down and then put housing on it, and that's sort of class of brownfield site. I'd have to look at the exact definition, but that's how I use the term. Is brownfield has had something on it. Where it gets a bit confusing, I think Samford actually is it is a green field. It is very much an existing grassland, whereas the one we're doing at the moment, King's Kerswell, it's never had building on it before, but it was a bit scrappy and a bush and bits tipped on it, and so it was much less appealing. I think technically probably it is still greenfield because it has no buildings on it.
There was a question that came in about the value of the houses. So a 4-bed detached, for example, in Samford, what what does that number look like compared to, say, the 3-bed?
I mean, it is hard to say because values are changing, but the appraisal figures we've got the 3 beds in at between 350, 375, and the 4 beds are between 500 and 600 because they're 2 different sizes, and one's double garage, one's single garage. But yes, that sort of late 300s for the 3 beds and between 5 and 6. I think it might be some of late 475 actually. Yeah, between 5 and 6 generally is for the 4 beds.
Thank you.
Okay, there's 2, and I'll do them in particular order. So, how will you keep in touch with your investors during the course of the build?
Excellent question. So we will give regular updates. So we'll produce a regular report to say what's happened on site, what have we achieved over the past month or quarter or whatever, however often we report, and what we're expecting to achieve in the next period. And then financial update as well at the time, say that this is where we projected at the beginning, this is a cost to date, these are any add in the midst of that we've got as we go through, and this is where we expect to be at the end. But also, be delighted if people are local or are happy to travel down to do a group site visit and show people around the site at a time that they can go and see different stages, go and see what's happening on site. We also talked about if required, we do more webinars and then I can update and have some imagery there. But also people through the simple crowdfunding platform can ask questions at any time, and we can answer those as they come in.
Fabulous. So I think personally, I quite like site visits, so it'd be lovely to come down and meet you and see the site at different stages. Would be good.
Yes, and that all forms part of the learning program, doesn't it? Because it's helping investors understand what's happening at different stages of the project, isn't it? So, and webinars, absolutely, we can do more. They will become private for investors. So we're not likely to do public ones moving forwards for this project once the project closes. But also in terms of the updates, as you mentioned, so what will happen so that everyone knows, the update will come to us and we will make sure it gets distributed, and there will always be a copy of it available through your portfolio against this project. So you'll always have visibility of the progress throughout.
There's a question from Gary. Why have we chosen to work with simple crowdfunding?
Such lovely people. I think it's so we have worked with a number of smaller investors before, and we've also worked with a smaller number of investors with larger sums of money, and it was they're two slightly different ways of doing it, but we've enjoyed doing both. And I think the people we've worked with where we've had smaller amounts of money have really enjoyed seeing, having the update. So we do the same with the people that we're working with at the moment, not through simple crowdfunding, just investors that we've developed over time, and we send them regular updates and let them know, and it's it's really rewarding aspect to see. So some just get the update and that's all they need. Others like to ask more questions. I really enjoy it when they come down and see the site, and I've done just in the last couple of weeks, had a couple of investors come to site and have a walk around and see things and ask questions. And so I like the idea of working, seeing real people, real faces, and so yeah, I think it's a nice way of doing it, and also I suppose it allows people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access these sort of returns to access these sort of returns, and for us it works. There are more expensive ways of us getting funding out there. So this is to me seems like a sensible and fair return but allows us to do what we do and make a return for ourselves. So it financially, it works for us this way, but also it'll be rewarding to work with people who want to be involved in it.
And we're really glad that you picked us.
Absolutely. It's only on.
What was the next question?
I think, so one which I think was answered indirectly, but I'll ask it, it's very subtly different. What is the local demand for housing?
That is a good question. It is there, it's definitely there, but I suppose it depends on what sort of, so the product we're doing in King's Kerswell, where's 2 and 3 bed houses, there are a good number of local people buying there. The one that we've done in Ottery St Mary, which is higher end, I mean, they're 2 bed apartments, but they're higher end, we're seeing more out of area people. And so I don't honestly know with Samford whether we'll end up, because of the price point, whether we'll end up with some local people not being able to afford to buy the bigger houses because of the specification and stonework and all the rest of it.
You do also have low-cost units though as well, don't you? So
we
you
do,
have
yes.
got a really good spread.
Yes, we do. You're right. Yeah. So there are 3, and actually we're just negotiating with the local authority at the moment the tenure of those, and that there's a fairly new scheme that the government have got for affordable housing called First Homes, which would allow us to sell there. There's still people that qualify. So I believe it's on the housing register and with a local connection. But we would be able to sell directly to them as opposed to selling them to the housing association. But it would be at a discount to open market. So yes, you're right, Devin. There is going to be a mix.
That's really nice actually, because you get that mix of serving different communities, as well as having the mix of different house types and all the benefits that brings. It looks, I think, more interesting, and it helps the project from be more robust. Because as you said, it means you can target lots of different markets.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask if anyone has any more questions, then now's your chance to either add it to the Q&A or the chat.
Just had one come in.
Go on, yeah.
One from Kathleen. Thank you, Kathleen. Do you always incorporate low-cost housing on all of your sites?
They are at the moment. We have done sites where they haven't been, but that's because the rules have changed over time. So there was a period when schemes under 10 didn't need to have any they didn't seek any contribution. But we have done one. So the one in Teignmouth, we had an off-site contribution. So we paid an amount of money to the local authority to provide the housing elsewhere. That was their desire, that they felt that the apartments we were building there weren't really suitable for the people on the housing register, so that they were keen to see that. Ottery St Mary, because it was a conversion of a building, then we didn't have any affordable houses there. But all our schemes at the moment have, so that the 23 in King's Kerswell, their affordable housing being sold to a housing association. Obviously Samford they are, and April Pen there are affordable houses, yeah.
Thank you. So if anyone wants to find out more about the opportunity, the details are on Simple Crowdfunding's platform. You can access it by just logging in to simplecrowdfunding.co.uk. And to go directly to the investment page, just /property, but you'll be able to find it on site. With regards to the IM, the investment memorandum, full details will be made available early next week, and we will let people know when the details are being made available. And we'll also let you know when we'll switch this project on so we can start funding it and getting investment in. So if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to say a huge thank you to Justin for sharing your project and sharing information about yourself. Thanks, Davin, for co-hosting as well.
Thank you, Justin. That was absolutely fab.
No, thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you to everyone who's joined and shown an interest.
Absolutely, and thank you to everyone who's made the time to join us today.
Thank you for registering and joining as well. Yeah, absolutely great. And hopefully we'll be speaking to you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.